Okay, welcome members. Just to remind you, we are broadcast online and throughout Parliament buildings, and I just would like to welcome those people who are watching us. Just to ask that you ensure your mobile phones are muted, and if you're content, we'll move on with the agenda. Okay, so we have apologies from Sinead. We may have Claire Sugden, she may join at some stage, but she's not here yet. Any declarations of interest, members? No. Okay. Okay. So just
in terms of records, it's only disposal, so it's not talking about pruning. Just I was a minister at one stage.
Okay. Thank you. Noted. Thank you. Okay. So in terms of chairperson's business, I would refer you to pages 6 to 61 of the pack. Just to advise, the Open University has sent through a report entitled "Learnings from Why Riot: The Whys Beneath Youth Violence," and the report found that youth violence, antisocial behaviour, and self-destructive actions are significantly reduced through the programme, which lays the ground for a more inclusive, peaceful and prosperous society for all. The report sheds light on the corrosive social and health issues behind youth violence, and the report is of interest to committee members given our view and our scrutiny of good relations work within the Executive Office. So the Open University has offered to brief the committee on its report and its findings. So Carol, did you...
Yeah, I went to the launch. It was very, very good. It was in the Shankill Women's Centre last week. Really good. I have to say, I thought the researchers who all came from, they were youth practitioners across the city, and very, very compelling. I think we could learn a lot from them.
Okay, well I think if we just note the report, but I think if we could ask that it be added to the forward work programme, I think it leads into or leans into the work we were doing last summer after the riots in particularly South Belfast after the anti-racism rally. Okay, so thank you. So draft minutes, members, I'll refer you to pages 62 to 70 of your pack and just ask, are you content that these are a true reflection of the meeting?
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so matters arising, there are none. So if we're content to go into our oral briefing session. So today, members, we have a session with the Executive Office Secretary and departmental officials, particular focus on their departmental business plan. So I'll refer you to pages 73 to 74 of the pack for the clerk's brief, and pages 3 to 19 of the table pack for the Executive Office's business plan 2025 to 26. Okay, so we'll just let our guests join us. But today we will have before us David Malcolm, who's the Permanent Secretary Interim, Gareth Johnson, who is the Deputy Secretary Grade 3 Good Relations and Inclusion, Claire Archibald, who's the Deputy Secretary Grade 3 Finance, People and Planning, and Brenda Henderson, Deputy Secretary Grade 3 Executive Services and International Relations. So thank you all for coming. Welcome back to committee. We have received a copy of your business plan, so thank you for sending that in advance, and I'll just invite you to come forward with some opening remarks.
So, Chair, thank you very much. I know you've had a busy afternoon, so you'll be glad to hear I don't have 45 minutes to speak about your remarks. Can I first of all apologise, but you should have had the business plan from us for your packs on Friday. It was our oversight that didn't happen. I believe you only got yesterday, so I want to apologise to you and to all the members for any inconvenience that caused you. You'll see on page 4 of the business plan, I talk about a restructure, and therefore, rather than opening remarks, I'm simply going to, you will recognise Gareth and Claire. Brenda Henderson is new to the department, 4 weeks in, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask Brenda, Gareth and Claire just to outline what their new responsibilities are in the department, and then I basically open ourselves to yourselves.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead, please.
Okay,
thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, Brenda Henderson. I've just joined the Executive Office on the 1st of May. I will be responsible for Hawke's Office, for Executive Information Services, for the First Minister and Deputy First Minister's private offices, for the Programme for Government, for the Executive and Central Advisory Unit, and that provides secretariat support to the Executive and also leads on the British Irish Council. I have responsibility for the North-South Ministerial Council, for the International Relations team in Belfast, and that's really leading on the inward visits, obviously in partnership with Invest NI and Tourism NI. And I also have then responsibility for the 3 overseas bureaus in Washington, Beijing and Brussels, who I know provided briefing to you on the 21st of May.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Gareth Johnston, Good Relations and Inclusion. I've probably been the least affected by the changes. My responsibility for finance and corporate services has moved across to Claire. I've taken on responsibility for the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls programme. So Good Relations and Inclusion sums up the directorate. It has been an opportunity to bring together all of, if you like, the social policy responsibilities that the department has. So those cover good relations, including the T-Buck strategy, our programmes such as urban villages, communities in transition, ending violence against women and girls, victims' issues, whether they be for victims of the conflict, the troubles, victims of historical abuse, or victims and survivors from mother and baby institutions and Magdalen laundries. I've got race relations and refugees, equality and human rights, including the free distribution of period products, and the department's infrastructure projects in Ebrington and in Mays-Long Kesh.
Okay, go ahead please, Claire.
So I have moved across to, as Gareth says, take on the Finance and Corporate Services brief. The directorate is called Finance, People and Planning. That includes obviously finance and governance. It includes the business planning and risk management that comes to the board. It also includes looking after our people in terms of workforce planning, training, development, and implementing the civil services people strategy at a departmental level. It also includes the COVID inquiry response for the department and the civil contingencies team, which is an important piece of the department's work. And I also look after the economists.
Just Chair, again with apologies for the slight delay in getting the business plan to you. Happy to take questions on our business plan for the year ahead.
Okay, well thank you very much, and so you're all very welcome. So I suppose just cut to the chase on a lot of this. I think I certainly still remain quite frustrated that there are delays in some key pieces of work coming forward, and as basic as going down to assembly questions written, they're delayed. That sometimes you can't quite believe that it was actually sent through. There was maybe 3 or 4 words. Sometimes it can feel like a bit of a brush off. As you say, we get our papers late. Sometimes, if at all, we've had to actually cancel sessions. And I'm just wondering now, you're a year in, what are you doing to improve the way that you can support us to hold you to account for the people that we represent?
So, look, Chair, it's a fair point, and it's a question I knew I was going to pop in there for when I saw us not meet the deadline on Friday. I thought it was a tremendous own goal. And I'm aware you wrote to us some months ago now with it. I looked at that correspondence that came in. What I'd say is there isn't a single reason why we don't meet our deadlines. So first of all, there's nobody in the department, well, it's ministers, their offices, our officials. We are all committed to doing the best we can to meet the targets we're required to do. There's absolutely no slight on anybody in trying to do the best they can. It's challenging, but we operate a joint office, as you know. But it's the bandwidth as well of the office and the areas we've got responsibility. Just in the last year, our ministers chaired 39 meetings of the executive, answered nearly 800 AQs, 20 oral question sessions. They've been to the BIC, of 2 BICs, of 2 NSMC plenaries. They've a range of intergovernmental. So I'm not. To many of you will think like you just make excuses, David. There's also the challenge that presents for officials, because we have to provide the support and the briefing for that. So, we have a range of challenges. We have a range of our ministers' diaries can only accommodate so much. It is a joint office, and I think both our ministers have been quite open. At times, things will have to be worked through a political solution to some of the issues that they face. And of course, we also deal with some of the really sensitive and difficult issues across society. So we are so. If there was a single thing that I could put my finger on and fix it, I would have done it by now. The reality is there isn't a single thing. There are pressures on officials, there are pressures on ministers' diaries, and then there's the nature of the office. I've worked in an office where our department with one minister, and it is just so totally different to TO. TO is a very unique department. I'm sure you guys already appreciate that anyway. So when we don't meet deadlines, And we do quite often, deliver, but when we don't meet deadlines, it's not that we can point to one thing and say that's always the problem. There will often be a range of issues at any one given time. But again, ministers, officials, myself, I can assure you, we are constantly looking to see how we can do better, and we are absolutely keen to do better. Unfortunately, I'm not going to sit here and say, you know what, we will, because that'll be a hostage to fortune statement that if I'm here in a year's time, you'll throw back at me again.
Okay. No, appreciate it. It will be difficult with 4 ministers and God knows, I think is it 8 special advisors, so you have to work
6, well 5 at the minute, but
okay.
potential for 6.
Okay, so I'm very conscious that we have had some programmes that have been running year on year, whether it's Good Relations, North Belfast Strategic Partnership Programme, whether it is the Communities in Transition. And when we had, I think it was maybe yourself, Gareth, presented the bids, for example, that went into, I think it was June monitoring round last year, and then we had a presentation earlier this year. Are you still convinced that it is the best use of public money, those programmes? Are you getting the outcomes that we need in society? Or are we continue to fund and keep organisations? I'm from the community voluntary sector, so I'm very supportive of it. But is it the best use of public money? And are we getting the best results? Because if we're working off figures from 2016, for example, in Communities in Transition, how are you convinced that you are still actually delivering when we still have community workers by day, paramilitaries by night, we still have intimidation in our communities, people getting put out of their houses, etc. So, and when I ask about evaluation, that's all part of the review of TBUC, that I never get a straight answer from you in terms of how you are assured, which doesn't assure me, that you're using public money to the best use.
Let me bring Gareth, give you the detail, but I can show you. So the Communities in Transition Programme, we carried out an evaluation recently of what we've been doing before to inform this current tranche. I think we've just gone to procure, and we've just announced a number of organisations who will be delivering the funding going forward. That was informed by the evaluation of before. So to give you the assurance that we aren't just cut and paste every year, same old. We do actually do evaluations. We do look at the lessons learned, and then we refresh, and that can sometimes lead to groups who have maybe in the past been funded and not getting funding. I'm sure committee are aware, you've been lobbied, I'm sure, around that. So that, whilst it's not good for those organisations that then aren't successful the second time round, it at least should give you assurance that every fresh round comes with it a fresh opportunity to review and evaluate. CIT, there's been some work on that. Gareth, you can put more meat in that for me.
Yeah. Well, to take CIT as an example, the programme started with a wide range of programmes. For example, we were looking at health and well-being in areas. We were looking at how you strengthen people against paramilitary money lending. We were looking at some of the mental health issues. There has been an evaluation of that as we've moved into phase 3, and as a result of that, we have seen both what has worked best of the various things that we've done, and also we've seen that communities have changed and the need has changed with that. So as a result, in phase 3 of Communities in Transition, we have put a tighter focus on the projects that we're putting out contracts for, that we're procuring. The focus is on exploitation, be that sexual, be it to do with children and crime, be it to do with money. Mental health and addictions, which can make people vulnerable to paramilitary influence. Lack of aspirations amongst young people, with the same result, and the impact of paramilitarism on the physical landscape. So one example of where we have tried to keep pace with the evidence and with local needs.
But just to pick a point that we have raised a number of times, where is the evidence that you're still targeting at the communities that need it most? For example, there's not one in South Belfast, and I know obviously I represent South Belfast, but that is where we see huge concentration of paramilitary activity still.
Yes.
So you're still working off figures from years ago?
Well, no, we have the latest figures. We're still working in 8 areas, and the initial allocation that we've had for Communities in Transition for the current year, 2.9 million, we didn't feel immediately let us move into new areas because you have to make sure that you're providing the right support in the areas in which we're already active.
I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. When the Deputy First Minister answered a question to me last autumn, and I said, what is happening with phase 3? I was advised that you were going out, possibly looking at research. Then when you come back, he said, oh no, I don't think we're doing research. If you have this evidence, if you have this information that you are working off now, why, when you know this is an issue for us on this committee, why have we not been supplied with that information?
I'm not sure that we've had a direct request for it, but certainly if there is a desire in the committee to see that, we can share the results of the research. What I would say is that
Gareth,
there
please,
is
honestly, I'm going to move on because we have asked continuously and we've raised it continuously.
Can I say something specifically about South Belfast, which is that there is a real desire to expand what we're doing in communities in transition. There is a bid that's going into June monitoring, and there is a list of other areas that we would very much want to move into if the funding would become available. We're also looking in parallel at where Urban Villages is working, and the work that it's currently doing in South Belfast and could do in South Belfast is very much front and centre of that consideration.
Okay, I didn't want to make it about South Belfast. I wanted to make it about the transparency and the rationale for how public money is being allocated and whether it's being put to best use. So I'm going to move on. I'm conscious that we've got lots of other people waiting to get in, but I just want to pick up on the issue, and you've probably picked up on this, Brenda, around my concern around the value for money for the Beijing office. And we had the representative here, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And I think we've put in asking yourselves, and I'm sure whether you feel that it's value for money, but as a committee we have really very little sense of, was it about £250,000 every year what's being spent of, again, public money, of what's happening with that. So you're just new into this role. What are you going to do to improve the transparency around how that's spent and make it more impactful in terms of the people from Northern Ireland, how they benefit from that spend every year? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, and I know that you have written, and there will be a response to that in due course. In terms of, I watched the session from the 21st of May, and I know the frustration around the transparency and how do we account for what we do. So one of the things that I want to do is to get that coherency across all 3 bureaus and with the international relations team in Belfast to make sure that we have a clear narrative, that our communications plan can let our ministers see and let you see exactly who we're meeting, what's the outcome of that, what does it mean, the so what question in terms of the programme for government. So those are things that I know the teams, and I think they discussed this with you, that they're working on already about the comms plan, the narrative, how does it link back to the difference that it makes here in NI. So we are going to look at that, and work's already underway in that.
At what point, and it cuts to my last couple of questions there, at what point do you say, this is not value for money? We could be doing other things with that money, whether it's good relations, race relations, victims and survivor support. At what point do you say, after 12 years, or 11, 12 years, what are we getting?
I suppose, Chair, what I would like to do is to see, there's different ways to measure value for money. One of the things that I know that the overseas offices do is that they build relationships. You have to build those relationships before you can actually utilise them. But there are things about companies or investment or increased student places they may bring. I think what we need to do is be more absolutely transparent about that and be clear about the metrics and what we can measure, that we do measure, and that we stand in front of those. So that's what I would ask to have some time to do, and obviously we're happy to come back to the committee and test that with you as well.
Chair, can I just come? So I was immensely frustrated watching that session because I can see behind the curtain and I know what our Beijing office is doing. But the fact that we cannot communicate that to you leads to genuine questions about, well, there's value for money. So just the day before that committee session, the Vice Minister for Education in China visited Northern Ireland. He signed an agreement with Confucius Institute in Belfast and the Department for Economy for a £34 million programme over the next 10 years. They have increased their funding in here. I know, Stuart, you have concerns about Confucius. In GB, there are problems with Confucius. In Northern Ireland, it's entirely different. The Ulster University model that they're running. So there are hundreds of schools. There are about 50 odd teachers that are working in our schools every year in City Hall. The Lord Mayor hosts hundreds of children who have benefited through it. In Beijing this St Patrick's Day, there were 2 community organisations led by Chris Hazard who were out in Beijing as a result of that. Young people who hadn't left Ireland before were all of a sudden getting the experience and opportunity. So there is significant work we're doing. We also are talking to the Chinese Consul about a mini conference here later on. We've talked about the British China Bank in Beijing about coming here. They operate a one-stop shop for organisations who want to invest and set up there. So there's a tremendous amount going on. The Arts Council, the Chinese have agreed to fund 3 placements in Beijing through the Arts Council for people to give them an opportunity to break into the Chinese market. There is a tremendous amount we're doing. We didn't sell that to you. I absolutely accept that, and that's what Brenda's challenge is coming in. It's not just in Beijing, but in Washington. We punch miles above our weight in the representational role we get in Washington and indeed in Brussels. So I get what you're saying, but don't add up. Just because we have failed to tell you, don't assume that means it's not value for money. We need to be better at telling you the story.
Okay, that's the very last comment from me. So whenever that lady was before us when she'd just taken up post, and we said no press statements, no tweets, nothing. So that was like 10 months ago, and still nothing. So it's almost as if the committee meeting didn't take place. So if you come back in a year, honest to goodness, please don't come back in a year and hold your hands up again and say, sorry, we still haven't got round to sorting the comms out. So I'm going to move on. Deputy Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for joining us today. The first line in your aims is to ensure the machinery of government works effectively. Well, it's clear from your opening statement that it's not working effectively because you don't even correspond with the committee who holds you to account in a timely or effective manner at all. So how on earth are you achieving government working effectively?
So don't assume that just because we're not meeting our deadlines to yourselves that we're actually not working effectively. I think the Minister's been very clear about what this executive has achieved. Programme for government, first time in 14 years, an agreed budget, twice agreed. When the executive came in, they have launched an End Violence Against Women and Girls strategy. They've agreed a refugee and asylum seeker strategy. The legislative programme has been agreed. There's a victims and survivors strategy agreed. There's been a lot of work around childcare. This executive has delivered significantly, and our team behind the scenes support the work of the executive. They support the work of the ministers in achieving that. So the machinery of government is much more than our interaction with you, but I absolutely get that our interaction with you hasn't been where we would want it to be, but it would be wrong to assume that we're not delivering, ministers are not delivering a machinery of government just because we're not engaging with yourselves in the timely way we'd like to.
But I think, Chair, there's a fundamental misunderstanding here. This is the committee of the Assembly that holds the Executive Office to account. All of those programmes which you have referenced to us, all of that work which you have claimed that the First and Deputy First Minister have been working on, you are accountable to this committee and through this committee to the Assembly for that. We either have to drag the information out of you or plead with you to bring bills forward. None of it happens in a timely or effective, or, and to quote your own word, effective way. That's the reality of life for this committee. And I think there's a general public criticism, and one could be quite cynical about this, in that all the First and Deputy First Minister seem to do is to kiss babies and get photo opportunities. But what were civil servants doing up until the end? And I can be highly critical of the fact that there was no Assembly for 2 years. Don't get me wrong on that front. But what were civil servants doing during that 2-year period? Why wasn't there a day one brief which said, here are the top 10 priorities for you coming into this office? And you need to not only deliver those, but you need to deliver those in consultation with the 90 odd people that are sitting in that chamber through this committee. Why was none of that happening?
Well, you're making an assumption there, because I'd say it was happening.
Nobody knew.
Well, with all respect, if you speak to, I was in the Department for Economy at the time, and I can assure you we had a first strike brief ready for a minister coming in, like I'm certain every department had for the minister coming in. I'm sure ministers in Justice and Agriculture and here, there are all briefs presented to them, but equally, that's simply civil servants bringing them the litany of issues that have built up that we couldn't address. We can't address during this period, this Assembly not sitting. The civil service are very limited in what they can do. The Secretary of State gave us very, very limited powers, but we weren't ministers and we never wanted or pretended to be. So what we did was we presented to ministers. So I would challenge your assumption that we didn't. We did, but ministers needed time to get back into their brief. They needed time to pick up and for them to get back in and have those conversations. So we have delivered. The ministers are here in a few weeks. They will absolutely refute the allegation they haven't delivered. You've heard them in the Assembly. They will point to programme of government. They point to legislative. They point to all these things that have been delivered. So they have, and they could only have been delivered with the groundwork that they done based on what also their civil servants have been doing for them.
Well, perhaps one message you could take back to them is it would be very helpful if they would appear in front of this committee and talk to us about those issues in a regular and timely fashion. And maybe that would open up the two-way street of communication that we really need. Can I turn then, Chair, briefly to the point that you raised around international relations? It isn't just about communications, which are and were woeful and remain so because nothing seems to have changed, but it is in reality about outcomes. We see no evidence of outcomes from China, and I do harbour and continue to have serious concerns about the Confucius Institute. It seems to me that the love-in that you have with them is because this is the only part of the United Kingdom that is prepared to have that love-in with them.
Well, I'd argue it's not a love-in that we have with them, it's a love-in that the schools have with them. There are dozens and dozens of schools, there are hundreds and hundreds of children and parents who are benefiting and enjoying what the Confucius and Ulster University are delivering. So I think, and one of my challenges to them is that they need to get on the front foot and start to explain it. I can see what they're doing. I can see the engagement with their schools. I can see that the teams that went over to Beijing and experienced leaving Ireland north or south for the first time ever. I can see the benefit that does for those individuals and for them collectively and as organisations. So it's not a love-in. There are real things. I talked to you about the fact that we've now increased that from, I think it's 2.6 million a year. It's now 3.4 million. It's committed for the next 10 years. That's a direct consequence of work that was being done through our Beijing office as well. So there are outcomes. Equally, Invest NI in Tourism Ireland meet every month with Kerry in Beijing to review what was happening there, because if the Northern Bureau, Kerry talked about having a Seamus Heaney poetry event, that's not just to teach Chinese about poetry. People who will come into that, the Chinese people who will come into that, they tend to be high worth individuals who will have businesses or organisations or an interest in travel, and that's where we therefore, when we bring them in through events like that, we need to connect them to Invest and to Tourism Ireland so that we present a united one-team approach. That's what we're working on doing, so we are. So that is happening. Again, I get your frustration that we're not communicating that to you, but it is happening. I can see behind the curtain. What I need to do is I need to find a way to pull that curtain back so that you can equally see that and be slightly more reassured around some of our work.
Invest Northern Ireland are already there, and they would claim that they were doing the same or similar work. Can I then turn finally, Chair, to specifically to Gareth's work around communities in transition? How many years since the Troubles, since the Good Friday Agreement? How much longer, realistically and seriously, can you sit there and say that this is not a programme of failure? When will a community transition? Has any community actually transitioned? What's the outcome and where is the achievement in all of that? And again, perhaps the cynic in me would say, you can't move on to other communities, and the Chair's made comment about other communities which could benefit from some of this work or some of the learning models from this work, but the very people that you're currently working with, would it be fair to suggest that they keep dragging you back in by suggesting that we can't transition until you keep feeding us money? That's a serious concern for me. And you also said that this current tranche a lot of it will concentrate on health and well-being. Why isn't that money just simply given to the Department of Health to deliver those programmes?
We're never in communities in transition going to solve the problem of paramilitarism on our own. And we do work in localities, for example, in South East Antrim, in Larne and Carrick. We're working very closely with PSNI. And we can complement the work that PSNI is doing. So there's disruptive work that PSNI can do. We can come in and seek to build up the community. Our purpose in CIT is to strengthen communities to resist paramilitary control. Now, I've sat with a group of ladies in Rathgill Estate and have heard from them about the work that they've been doing on illegal money lending, on alternatives to illegal money lending, and on what they can do as peer educators to share that information. I've seen in North Belfast where a social supermarket is helping people to get out of the cycle of reliance on illegal money lenders who we know are controlled by paramilitaries, to get out of that cycle and to be able to put money into the credit union instead of to pay off these debts. And I've seen individuals with complex lives who, through the projects that we're funding in CIT, have been helped to navigate to a situation where they have accommodation, they have a job, they have childcare, and the kind of risk factors that were there for them that paramilitaries could exploit have been very much reduced. So I see those impacts. I'm not pretending that we're going to solve the whole thing, but at least in our corner, even if it's a small corner, we can do the best that we can.
Many of those programmes exist in different forms across the whole of Northern Ireland through district councils and through other government projects and programmes. Why is there not an end point to communities in transition? Why is there not research to say that we have transitioned to the point where we can actually hand that over to others and put it into the mainstream pots of supporting social supermarkets and anti-money laundering and debt advice?
And there have been aspects where that has happened. So, for example, at the start of Communities in Transition, we'd been funding health fairs. We're not doing that anymore. There are others who are active in that way. But we see situations where the other services that are available are not able to meet the need in a timely way. We see risks for communities in terms of paramilitary influence that leads to, and we're trying to address those. Now, it is clearly really important that we do that in a joined up way with the other services that are working locally. And I could point to various communities where we've been getting alongside the community, working with them to build capacity, to identify a plan, and then seeking to deliver that plan. And there is a degree now of collaboration on all of that across government departments. For example, the RAISE programme, which the Department of Education is running. I sit on the programme board for that. My staff have been working very closely in the areas where we're active with RAISE staff, so that we complement rather than duplicate. So absolutely there is a coordination that needs to happen. But anywhere where we're seeking to meet need, it's because there's a need there.
And just finally, does that mean that we can see that by building capacity in mainstream organisations, that the real transition will be from CIT to the broad base of community organisations that deliver all of these programmes?
Very briefly.
Absolutely, and you could see that across all my programmes. So I think a factor in good relations going forward will be how do we mainstream some of that work, ending violence against women and girls, a huge emphasis on getting EVOG work into other people's strategies.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just conscious of time. Brian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for attendance. I will say, before I go on to my main question, in terms of the Northern Bureau in Beijing, I have more awareness of the work that Bureau is doing. I mean, its budget is around half of our budget, or our office in Brussels, and around a quarter of the budget or the office in North America. And I know the importance, when you're working with China, of building a relationship over time. You don't just land in there and expect things to happen. And where the Queen's University, China Medical College in Shenyang, and the Bombardier, as it was then, factory in Shenyang, now I presume it's Spirit, and the numbers of Chinese students coming here and studying in our institutions, so, and the work at the Confucius Institute. So I know some members have concerns about China. Part of that's political, I do believe. But it's right that we scrutinise, what benefit is coming from the money, and we look forward to getting more information on that. But I know it's an important relationship with one of the most populous countries in the world. In terms of the role of the Executive Office, I mean, coalition government is not easy. 4 parties in the government and 2 in one department, so that's understood. People sometimes look to the Executive Office. At one level, it's another department. It's one of the 9, but it also has a coordinating role, or should have. And we try to avoid this silo mentality of just dividing up powers between ministers and departments, and politically, that must be a working together. So could you talk about that? Because sometimes people will write to this committee or approach the department with concerns they have about the executive as a whole, and how do you take on that responsibility for ensuring the good functioning of the executive as a whole? And I'm thinking in particular of the delivery unit and the transformation board, and how are you increasing that coordinating role?
You're absolutely right about the Executive Office and government here. It's not easy. I think that's a massive understatement. So it is, but our ministers are delivering. So they, if you think about the Executive Office, it's like a Prime Minister's office, it's a Foreign Office, it's a Cabinet Office, and they have policy responsibility for areas. So it is a large responsibility that takes a lot on their time. But the programme for government is all about trying to break free from silos. Our constitutional arrangements here have individual ministers and individual accounting officers. You know that, you know the reasons why, but that doesn't mean to say that we can't break away from that. We can't work better across, and that's what we have to do. The programme for government is a really good start now, because it identifies 9 priorities that aren't owned individually by one. We all have to play a role in that. The ministers are really keen that actually delivery is it has been their buzzword for the last 12 months that I've been here, and they're absolutely intent on making sure that the programme for government is delivered as far as it possibly can. The delivery unit that they have established, and I believe there'll be further details on that coming shortly. They want to try and put a laser light focus on certain areas in the programme for government. So they've attempted to put some budget to the programme for government. We all know there are problems with budget, and so it's never going to be enough. But at least we have a programme for government, and we now have a budget which is attempting to put some money into that as well. And now the delivery unit under the reform and transformation will attempt to put a further light, a laser focus on some of those PFG outcomes that ministers agree collectively that needs a firmer push. So that's what in TO we're trying to do with the government. Minister said reform and transformation should be key at part of government. That's what we're trying to do now, so it is.
And do you feel you're getting that cooperation from the departments, from the ministers, in this collaborative approach? And when will be the first report on the programme for government?
So ministers absolutely they agreed to a programme for government. So absolutely every minister around that executive table signed up to the programme for government, and then the budget went with it. So I think that's a really good outworking of it. It was only agreed in March, so the first delivery report from that will be a year from March. It'll probably drift into slightly after that, so we can get a full financial year out of it. So it will. Certainly departments are absolutely working together, because in a time of constrained financial resources, we need to work smarter and smarter and smarter. And actually, a number of the executive strategies that we're looking at can only be delivered with a number of departments working together. I know it's been a source of frustration to PAC that departments work in silos, and so, as I say, as accounting officers, we're attempting to work more like this. That's where the head of the service is really keen that the Permanent Secretaries Group is working more horizontally and more corporately. The work of the NICS board, which has been enhanced in our 3 subcommittees, again, it's attempting to break away from the narrow silo mentality. Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is easy. It's not. If it was easy, we'd have done it by now. But we have made a really significant start, and I think the executive support for it and the ministers signing up to a programme for government and a budget behind that, I think it's a really, really powerful sign to each of their departments and their civil servants that they want to see this working better, and that's what we will take our inspiration from.
Okay, well, look, we hope so, and we'll judge as we see progress. I want to ask, Chair, just on page 5 of your report, arm's length bodies. There's a list there around, I didn't count up, around a dozen. What is the purpose and advantage of delivering services through arm's length bodies as opposed to directly in-house by government departments?
So I think arm's length bodies, like it's really important. In our department, our arm's length bodies, and you're right, there were 12, whether you add them or not. They account for just over a third of our budget, so they are important. And indeed, I was at a session that Neil Gibson, the Permanent Secretary for the Department of Finance, gave yesterday. He'd given a presentation to the executive around the budget and the unsustainability of public finances here, and he asked the executive asked him to deliver that to our largest ALBs, not TOs, but in other departments, because they spend so much of the money in Northern Ireland. So the focus has got to be on their delivery agents. They're set up usually because they're more agile, they're closer to the ground, they can deliver better than central government. So what we have to do is make sure that they're set up, they're free to deliver, that we don't tie them in constraints. So there's work going on to make sure that the partnership arrangements between departments and the arm's length bodies give the arm's length bodies enough autonomy to get on and do what they were set up to do. But equally, ministers still have responsibility for them. They're still accountable. They're still spending significant amounts of public money. So it's always a tension to find that balance. We don't always get it right. Sometimes it tips one way and the other. But they are absolutely vital. If we're going to deliver the programme for government, if we're going to deliver, if you look at the ISNI, the capital projects, I think there's maybe something like 80% of them, if not more, are being delivered by ALBs. So they are a major part of what's happening here, and we need to connect with them better and get them ready and able to deliver better, just as we're trying to do within government.
Yeah, I mean, a concern I would have to the public, it just makes government seem more complex, and if there's an issue, who do you go to? Where does responsibility lie? And you mentioned accountability, and it's important that those arm's length bodies are accountable. And sometimes we have the experiences as MLAs when you ask a minister a question and you're told that's under responsibility of an arm's length body and you can't get the answer. So it's just to ensure that the arm's length bodies understand entirely that ultimately they're accountable to their departments, sponsoring departments, and to the Assembly, and in our role to the public through us.
So we have an arm's length body forum twice a year where their chief executive and chairs come in and meet myself and the senior team, and we have an open conversation about what's happening, about what's expected. Our arm's length bodies, they're not spending massive amounts of money like some other arm's length bodies are, but they have really important roles in delivering, particularly on some of the victim stuff and some of the survivors. So it's really important we keep tight to them. Our ministers will approve many of their business plans and their corporate plans. So our arm's length bodies don't they fully understand who they're accountable to. They're accountable to our ministers. Our ministers are very clear about that. So they are. And through the mechanisms we have, I make sure that the arm's length bodies realise that as well. But it's a partnership. Mm-hmm. So it is. It's not a parent-child relationship. So it is. It has to be. And that's maybe in the past where we maybe haven't got that right. And we need to give them the autonomy to get free and deliver. But they need to understand they're spending public money. They operate under the control and direction, ultimately, of their ministers as well. So it's tension that we manage. I think we're getting better at that.
Okay. And one last question, Chair.
Right.
One of those ALBs, Commissioner for Public Appointments, has that post been vacant for a number of years now, and how close is it to being filled?
The post has been vacant for a number of years for different reasons. We have just completed the interviewing process and we have papers going to ministers. Ministers will obviously, they're an important part of the final stage of the process, so they are. So I wouldn't suggest it's imminent, but I would certainly like to think that if everything lands where it needs to land, ministers would be in a position in the coming months to make an announcement on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Timothy, please.
Thank you very much. I have I have a number of topics to get through, so we keep the answers as short as possible. Would you say that the office prudently uses its money, or is there a culture of waste that exists?
Would I say, sorry, I didn't hear the middle part of your question.
You would, in the department, that you would prudently use money, or is there a culture of waste that would exist?
So I've just signed off on our resource and accounts, and I'm, as accounting officer, I'm required to underline the internal controls we have, not just through our audit and risk committee, but also through the Northern Ireland Audit Office. I certainly I'm not aware of any culture of waste in any shape or form, so I'm not.
So in your booklet that you provided to us, the budget position remains very challenging. When I look at some of the figures, so we'll take the cost of the office of the head of the civil service. Back in 2021, the cost of the office was 487,000. Today, the cost of the office has skyrocketed to 448,000. That's somewhat 360,000 of an increase, 74% in 4 years. Why the sudden increase? 4 years, why so much money is now being put into that office?
And I think that's a better way of asking it rather than suggesting that it's wasteful, because the office has gone up. So the responsibilities of that office have increased over time. So, for example, the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board has been reconstituted. There are new 3 subcommittees out of it. That office also deals with honours for the whole of the Northern Ireland. The head of the civil service is chief executive for 24,000 civil servants. They are secretary to the executive, so not just are they the chief policy advisor for first and deputy first minister, for each of the executive office ministers. So they have. So the head of the service has also recently taken on the role as chair of the interim transformation board. So they have. So, whenever you see office costs going up, it's usually because the work and the demands in that office going up, whether it's the head of the civil service or any of our own teams here. It's not to say we have processes that manage that. People just don't decide we're going to do this or do that. There are processes. We have a people committee. We will look at the business case, and then funding decisions will be made based on basically what the work is directing. But generally, when the demands go up, the resources need to keep pace with that to meet those demands.
So I want to home in on the trip to Washington, where the head of the civil service had their own private car. When there was executive ministers used Uber, they shared lifts, they used the bus, they walked. Do you think that was a efficient use of public money?
So the trip when ministers or senior officials go to Washington, the Northern Ireland Bureau will look after the arrangements. We've got a number of assembly questions, media queries. We've worked through all these, but the idea that there is waste or extravagance just because public transport was made available for a senior official, again, we're not. It's just not accurate. My understanding is that I wasn't in Washington, but my understanding is the transport was provided through the Northern Ireland Bureau. Also accommodated other officials that travelled with the head of the service. So they did. So again, when you're out and you're going between a variety of different venues, again, I don't know what the travel arrangements for other ministers were, so I can't say it was appropriate for them to just get taxi or whatever. What I know is that whenever the programme was put together and sent over to our team in Washington, they made the arrangements just as they would normally make the arrangements. So they do. So again, suggesting that that's wasteful because they have put those arrangements in place, I don't think that's a fair assessment, so it's not. We have, again, policies and processes that govern whether it's ministers or senior officials travelling. There's policies that have to be adhered to, no matter who you are. We adhere to those at all times, so we do.
But on this trip in particular, you had Minister Lyons and Minister Nesbitt chose to use public transport, chose to walk between locations, chose to get an Uber, whereas we have the head of the civil service getting chauffeured about in a private car in America.
And again, I don't know what Minister Lyons, Minister Nesbitt's programme was, so I don't know. It might well be if they're going from one building to the next, of course, if you're travelling greater distances. Every case has to be looked at on its merit. So it is. But again, it is not unusual for when ministers and senior officials travel on business to Washington that the Northern Ireland Bureau will use the existing approval processes to put in place whatever necessary arrangements. That'll happen every year, so it will. And it's a normal part. The idea that was a private car for only one individual, that's not the facts of what this case was, I understand it. But we'll work through the answers of that, so we will.
Foreign travel since the executive returned, 126,000. Looking down through the list, Washington, we had 2 officials, Brussels, 1 official, St Patrick's Day last year, we had the First Minister, Deputy First Minister and 10 officials. St Patrick's Day to Brussels last year, we had the Junior Minister, 2 Junior Ministers and 6 officials. There's a catalogue of excessive travel and travel with the number of officials that are attending, but there's one sticks out here. In August 24, Assembly recall, First Minister £920 and an official £542. Can you tell me more about that?
Sorry, what was the first? I didn't hear what the
So
was.
the Assembly recall is what it's under here, and this was in August 24. And there's a figure of £920 for the First Minister and £542 for an official.
Again, Assembly recall?
Yeah.
We had to come off our holidays.
Oh, sorry, has that been, so this is the time, and again, I don't want to, but we had a situation where we were in recess, people were on holidays, and all of a sudden a situation back home developed which needed security briefings, the executive being recalled, the assembly being recalled. If you're saying to me it was unreasonable to pay for somebody to come back to lead all that.
It's obviously paying for somebody to go out and then come back, the official, but why is there an expense for an official?
Well, when you go on holiday as a minister or senior official, you're not taking your work or your laptop or anything with you that you can receive. This issue that developed, there were quite significant security issues and briefings that needed. The minister was coming back to chair a meeting of the executive the next morning, a meeting with the chief constable, a meeting the executive, an assembly recall. It would have been impossible for her to come back cold into any of that. So again, whilst all public money is public money, I think in the circumstances and the fact that we were heavily eating into somebody's private holiday, and given the circumstances, again, I think any suggestion that's excessive or wasteful, that wouldn't be an opinion. That's a subjective opinion I wouldn't necessarily agree with.
Climate change obviously sits below. Is there any concern? So we have the Climate Commissioner, first region in the UK, to get our own climate commissioner in place. How do you think they'll feel about the amount of foreign travel? So we're all talking about climate change and cutting down our emissions and our carbon emissions, whereas it seems the Executive Office is very happy, and indeed the entire Executive is very happy to jet across the world to attend events and take officials with them. Is that something that this person will be tasked with looking at, to cut down in the amount of foreign travel?
I suspect that they're going to have that many things in their role. This will probably not be one on high. I think we need to understand, this, first of all, the Executive Office has 3 overseas offices. We have that for a reason, because we need to, you can't have a programme to grow a sustainable economy if you're going to sit in Northern Ireland and wait for people to come to you. Ministers and officials...
These are 3 offices that don't tell people in Northern Ireland what they do.
Well, they're obviously successful doing something, because we have significant investment in FDI in Belfast from American companies, and have for some considerable time.
Through Invest DNI or through the office?
Sorry?
Through Invest DNI or through the Bureau? the FDI's
So they work as one team. When ministers go out, ministers are representing Northern Ireland. Ministers are making the connections. Businesses want to talk to ministers. It's great they talk. I'd love to think that they want to talk to civil servants. What businesses want to do is they want to talk to the policy makers and decision makers, which are the ministers. So the ministers open the doors for the officials then to do the deals. That's what we do. So, again, whilst there's been a lot of talk about the cost of overseas travel, the idea that we would all sit in Northern Ireland and close our doors and not go anywhere, I don't know how that grows our economy. I don't know what helps us grow the economy here, creates jobs. Ministers need to travel to represent their constituencies, to bring jobs back in here. That's what they do. Officials then go in the back of that to cement those relationships. That's what happens in any country or any representation. I think we punch well above our weight. So we do. If you look at what the office in Washington costs us, you look at the representational value that we got and we continue to get through the White House, money can't buy you that sort of access, and what that then gives you later on. So again, I hear what you're saying, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with it.
Communities in transition. This has been well rehearsed both today and before. Something that I really have a bugbear about. So we're looking at 8 areas. It's been the same 8 areas in phase 1 and phase 2, and it's already been said, when does a community become transitioned? Mm-hmm. If you're talking about there's other areas needing money, but they'll not get that money until more money becomes available. Surely, once a community goes through phase 1 or phase 1 and phase 2, you move on into new areas.
So I think whether it's CIT or it's community relations funding, there are new calls put out all the time.
But it's the same areas in community and transition.
Well, it's not always the same areas, because the fact that number of
we
areas...
were told here before it was 8 areas in phase 1, 8 areas in phase 2, and I believe it's the same 8 areas in phase 3. And we have asked before, and I asked the Deputy First Minister on the floor of the Assembly, would they look at new areas? Oh yes, of course they would. Is phase 3, is it new areas or is it the same areas?
And we have looked at new areas. As part of phase 3, as said, we would like to move into new areas. The resources that were immediately available at the start of the year didn't let us do that.
There's going to be 6 phases of this communities in transition. Will you still be funding the same areas that you did years ago?
No.
So what is it, after 3 phases you now move on to new areas?
We base this on the evidence.
Which is 2016 data.
We had a piece of work done which looked at the level of need, looked at all the indicators, looked at the level of need across all of this place. And those areas were still being flagged as areas where there was particular need and where communities in transition could make a difference. Now, they were being flagged alongside other areas, and I would be very keen, if we can, and if we can gather some additional resource, that we would move and have an impact in other areas. We're doing the same kind of review on urban villages, where there have been areas where urban villages has made a great impact. We would want the opportunity now to bring that kind of impact, having learnt the lessons, to bring that kind of impact to other areas as well.
Yep. Chair, if I could move on. So on page 10 of your brochure, be ambitious but realistic and accountable for outcomes. Going back to the frustration before of tabled questions, I want to look at FOIs. Why did it take the TEO 6 months and a decision notice from the Commissioner to release information to an FOI had put in? You had refused to release the information. Why did it take a decision notice?
So
And you didn't release all the information requested, so I'm going to have to go and appeal that.
So we get approximately 200 requests during the year for data, FOI and other business usual data. Between 80 and 90% of those have been answered on time. Now, if you're one of the 10 or 20% that's not been answered on time, you will be unhappy. So, I get that. So again, let's not assume that, all our FOIs have not been answered. FOIs, by their very nature, have their own appeals, internal mechanisms, and they have their own independent challenge. So where we make a decision for honest and right reasons that we believe, it is absolutely right that there's an independent scrutineer that will hold us to account for those. So, the fact that somebody had a different opinion, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That shows the system works. You asked us for information. Our judgment was it couldn't be released for a various reason, and an independent scrutineer,
is that political?
The independent commissioner determined that it would be released, I think that's an example of the system working. As I say, we do answer over 80% of our FOI and information requests on time. I get it. If
The
you're
system only works when you're told to
and I
release the
get-
information.
And I get you'll not be happy if you're the one of the 20, but we are getting our FOIs answered, we are getting our data requests, but naturally the work of this department, it is complex. There are very sensitive issues dealing with. So it is a joint office, you know that. So you do, and therefore, we shouldn't be surprised that there will occasionally be FOIs that we'll make a judgment on, that somebody will look at in the cold light of the day and make a different judgment. That's how this organisation, the system works. That's what the FOI mechanism was set up to deal with. So I'd say
people.
it's working.
And I'm just conscious, Anya's now put her name down on the list. One more question, then we're moving on.
Last week we had officials in talking about the Windsor framework, and I had raised different issues and concerns regarding trade deal with America, and as such, the official basically made it out that all was good. Businesses, yes, they can apply to get money back, whereas I used an example in the chamber this week where there was the wooden floor company in Belfast, Richard Snape, was outlining how his business is in GB and he has one in Northern Ireland, so England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and he can no longer move goods between GB and Northern Ireland, or he gets a 49% anti-dumping tariff of wooden floors imposed on his business. Yes, he can claim it back through the duty reimbursement scheme, but we're not being treated as an equal part of the United Kingdom if that business has to pay a substantial amount of money, have to go through a process to claim it back. And in his quote, it was something along the lines of, it's a huge amount of work, you nearly have to bring in an extra member of staff just to do all the paperwork. That's a burden on a small business, and when you're looking at expanding, you could be paying someone to grow your business, not to navigate government bureaucracy. So from the evidence session last week, it was everything was good. You apply to this scheme, you get the money back straight away, whereas you have somebody here given the real world impact of the protocol. TEO has responsibility for the Windsor framework. It's about time that you woke up to the problems that are out there and be honest with committee and be honest with the people out there. Significant challenges being imposed because of the Windsor framework. Divergence is real, and turn around saying there's no divergence between GB and NI is false.
Okay, can we get the answer and then we move on?
I'm not sure there's much I can answer. I think, by and large, you're trying to take me into a political arena. In the department, our ministers will have a slightly different view on much of what you've said. What I disagree is that I would disagree that officials came here last week to be disingenuous in what they said to you. If there's a specific issue on that particular case you want to write us about, more than happy to look into it. But you're trying to take me into territory that it's just not possible for me to go into.
Okay, thank you. Carol, please.
Thank you. So the planned interventions around good relations, working with groups across in North Belfast, they're going to lose some money. They didn't get all their award. Is that the case, Gareth?
I'd need a bit more information about
Well,
what.
could you get back to me? It's in relation to some of the intervention money around summer. And then there's a reduction in the Engage programme, tackling paramilitaries programme in the education. And this was mentioned as well in terms of awards were made, but certainly there was a reduction in the amount or even the number of awards were made to groups here out doing intervention work with young people.
On the specifics, if you could get me the specifics
I'll
about
do
the
that.
groups that are involved, we can certainly provide more detail. What I would say at a general level is that a number of these schemes, such as the Central Good Relation Scheme, are application-based schemes. They are very competitive. The Central Good Relations, as an example, we had £7 million worth of applications as against over £2 million of a budget.
Can I just interrupt, Gareth?
Yeah.
So I don't think the amount of applications that come in from areas who are actually doing diversionary work on interfaces would appreciate that's the sum total of the applications that just received. But within those small areas that are facing the biggest difficulties, they're the ones. And so I will write you with details and I get a response.
And you do raise a real issue, which is to what extent going forward, and the T-Buck review will be looking at this, to what extent going forward are we looking at application-based programmes where we open a broad invitation to people to apply, and to what extent are we looking at more targeted requests, as we've seen in CIT, where we've gone out this time and we said, right, we want this particular thing to happen in this area.
Okay.
Now, can you come with proposals
Okay.
for that?
So the other aspect of things I wanted to ask in terms of costs, I put in a written question on the 28th of November 2024, which was answered on the 3rd of March 2025 in relation to the role of SIB in the development of ending violence against women and girls strategy. And I've asked, even at this committee, around the cost of SIB's involvement in that, and are they still part of the programme? Is that cost as well? I would appreciate that in writing. This will be the third time I've asked for it, certainly at committee, because what I'm not objecting to SIB's involvement at all, but it needs to be cut off, particularly when groups were involved in the really good work of development, and it's the same groups who are getting cut funding, and it's an equality issue that I feel it needs responded to.
I think what's significant there is that we've moved from a time when we were seeking to develop the framework, to look at all the evidence and to develop something that would make a difference here, because we know in the past
you're over the team, so
Yes,
is anybody
yes.
from SIB still working in your team in this strategy?
Yes,
Okay, so
but that involvement has reduced significantly.
okay, so they're on SIB rates rather than NICS rates.
We've done a comparison, and
Okay.
Given that these were specialist skills
Okay,
that
so
we didn't have.
So can I just say to you, those special skills are out in the community. I'm not saying get the special skills on the cheap. I'm not saying that at all. But when we talked about ALBs before and the imbalance in terms of relationships and indeed what people earn and the involvement, I feel that the community sector at times are being used. The recognition in terms of developing important strategies in terms of experience, that's fine, but when it comes to remuneration, it's not the same across the board. So I have an issue that we still have people almost 2 years from SIB involved in a programme that the community and voluntary sector helped develop and who are getting paid probably a third of what SIB are. So I'm just leaving that there, and I want...
The point I would want to emphasise is that through the initial delivery plan, we're putting £3.2 million out into
and that's great.
Community organisations.
No, that's Gareth, that's great news.
And if there is anything more that I can do to reduce central costs so that we can put more out, I mean, I'm hopeful that this year we will be able to put some more out. But those
Gareth, can I just
particular
interrupt? Can I just say, so, and I don't want to be rude, but I don't want you waiting my clock down. I've a couple other questions, so if we just leave it there. Okay. So in terms of the Truth Recovery Bill, we had Martin and the officials coming, and we're expecting that bill coming forward. I do think in terms of the support that the witnesses are going to need is going to cost money in terms of us as a committee. So, because, and you're aware of this, Gareth, through your previous work, that on HIA and others, that they are going to need specialised support going through this process. But see, in terms of the bill, when are we actually going to see the bill?
The bill will come before the summer recess.
Or the summer recess. So the summer the last Monday is Monday the 30th of June.
There's been communications with the speakers about the introduction, so it will come before the summer recess.
Okay, and then my last question, Chair, is see in terms of the commissioners, for the language commissioners and for identity and culture, when are they going to be in place?
The interviews are happening through this month. I think that the last of those interviews will happen by the end of June. So we're making preparations so that we can turn advice round to ministers about appointments very quickly after that. But good progress being made on the process. And just on the point about victims and survivors, absolutely, we already have a very comprehensive support service in place with VSS for survivors from mother and baby institutions and Magdalene laundries, and we recognise that will need to develop to support people who want to give evidence. Just as we've been seeking to support people, that there have been 175 people have given accounts of their experience to the independent panel. I think by the time it's completed its work, that will be over 200. And again, we've sought to make sure that the support is available.
So appreciate that update. Gareth, in terms of aptitude tests for the commissioners, was it just the Irish Language Commissioner had to go through an aptitude test?
The Irish, because it was a commissioner for Irish language, there was a test of Irish language proficiency, yes. The same wasn't applied to the Ulster Scots and Ulster British because the responsibilities there were for a wider range of cultural issues. And it wasn't felt that a language test was
fair enough.
Was
I just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Carol. On you, please.
Thank you, Chair. And look, I'm not going to go into a large preamble. Just off the back of, I think it was Brian's question, there was mention of the Transformation Board and the new delivery unit. How would the work of the Transformation Board aid the delivery unit?
So I think there's lots of synergies between what the transformation we've done, the projects I've identified, and only half the funding's been allocated, so there's another tranche that will be announced and rolled out. That brings a whole new approach. So there was a real challenge across the NHS to bring forward really transformative projects. In other words, not projects that just adds to your business that you've got short of a budget for. And that was a challenge for the civil service to identify really transformative. We have to be honest about that, but we have got some really good quality projects coming forward, and they're now going to be externally reviewed. So one of the committees of the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board is actually now going to focus on the delivery, not just of the delivery unit, but also on what they're delivering for the Transformation Board to make sure they're doing what they say in the tin. So they do.
Okay. And in terms of the work of the delivery unit, and I know there was officials in previously in relation to briefing us on the PFG, I suppose to wrap it up, how would the work of the delivery unit oversee other departments, even though obviously other departments, their ministers have total jurisdiction over their own policy remit?
So that's exactly what we're working through. So the First and Deputy First Minister will be speaking to their executive colleagues that might well involve an executive paper to get the executive to buy into this, because ultimately, this is part of the PFG. It was in the PFG that there would be a delivery unit set up to heart. The executive signed off on that. So again, stepping through what their plans are for the delivery unit so that they can get into other departments, and their ministers are quite relaxed about that, and their officials can engage. That will go through the executive, and therefore that will get the buy-in from the ministers, and then it will make it easier for the engagement at an official level.
Okay, and this, I suppose the next question, it's a wee bit different, but just to finish on this, David, in the event that the delivery unit does open, lines of communications or communication with ministers and with departments, and if there is, and I'm not saying there's going to be, I'm just playing devil's advocate, that there is possible pushback from a minister, what would happen in that instance in relation to the delivery unit?
Look, as I said earlier, our constitutional arrangements are that we all work in a certain autonomous area in terms of accounting officers and ministers, but the programme for government brings the whole executive in. So all the ministers have already signed up to this. And again, with the minister, the first step, first bringing the work of the delivery unit into the executive to get their agreement, that should avoid that actually happening. If there's going to be a problem down the stream, actually the executive won't agree to it up front. So getting their buy-in to the programme for government and now getting their buy-in to how the delivery unit will work, that should in effect by all the ministers that are going to be involved in the process into that. We will be starting small so that the delivery unit isn't going to start and scattergun all over it. We'll take a focus on 1, 2 or 3 small areas we can make an immediate impact on, we can learn, we can test and upskill. But getting executive agreement through the PFG, that'll be key to avoiding the scenario you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you, David. Just my final question is for Gareth, and I suppose I'm just looking for a quick update as to where T-Book is at the minute. There was a strategy review, I think, going on. So I suppose just where are we at with that at the minute?
There's been a strategy review that's been ongoing, and we're looking just very shortly to put a timeline and to put some proposals for engagement with stakeholders on the development of a framework for the future. Some of the things that have been coming out of the review have been actually that mainstreaming point that we were discussing earlier, the importance of mainstreaming good relations work, the linkages with wider work in other departments, that there are still very substantial issues and issues like sectarianism that the strategy needs to grapple with, and also that we are of course working alongside a more diverse community than in the past, and it's important that T-Buck continues to recognise that. So we will be bringing forward proposals for a design stage for a short design stage for the strategy. It's important that stakeholders have the opportunity to contribute to that, but in the meantime, all the current T-Buck actions are continuing. So we've had another round of programmes, and we're also getting funding out to departments as well for the important work that's being done in the headline actions like shared housing.
Just really small share in terms of a timeline, Gareth. How far are we off from going out to stakeholders, engaging with stakeholders?
We're pretty close to that. We just want to agree the mechanism exactly with ministers, but we're not too far away.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, one question I didn't get asked in you. Where is the race relations order? I think we as a committee are expecting that within this calendar or this financial year. When will that be coming before committee?
I probably can't give you an exact date, though if the committee would welcome a briefing on the detail of it and what's come back from the consultation, very happy to give that. We undertook consultation. We had a very good level of engagement on the kind of areas that the order needed to cover. Our desire is to have best-in-class legislation here and protections for people. We've been doing a lot of work with Departmental Solicitor's Office on all the detail that you have to look at in a piece of legislation. We're engaging with the Office of the Legislative Council, but if we can give anything by way of a further briefing, happy to do that.
Okay.
Can I ask one small
Yes, please,
question in
go ahead,
relation to
Karen.
T-Buck? Gareth, do you know if T-Buck funding was used for shared housing in the Laurel Park area?
I would have to check about the specific area. I know the shared housing programme as a whole has been probably one of the most successful pieces of T-Buck.
Really?
In that the targets that were originally there have been significantly
Okay, so Gareth, could you just find out for me? I'm not making any politics out of this, but I've heard that when it comes to the shared housing, where the housing is going to happen, the consultation in areas and communities doesn't happen. Okay, and then there are very vulnerable people put into houses, and once their religion becomes apparent, then the situation that we had happens now, or there's flags put up all around them. So
there's
that's why I said really, Riley, because
there's issues there that, of course, would be the responsibility of Department for Communities and indeed of the housing associations where they're providing housing. But if we can help with getting some more information on that,
would you please? Because I think it's important that people know what the process is. Everybody's for living in integration. There isn't a problem with that until something like this happens and people feel very, very vulnerable. And it was quoted to me that it was part of a T-Buck housing scheme, and that's the first I heard of it.
Okay, Timothy, you have something really small question.
Yeah, page 6 of your business plan. To deliver the new language bodies will likely require further bids in year through the monitoring rounds. So how much is the budgets for the language bids and how much are you short?
At the moment, I'd probably have to check just in terms of exactly the budget, but at the moment what the budget has enabled us to do has been to complete the design phase for the appointments and to do a lot of preparatory work around the staff that those bodies are going to need. So we've been developing job descriptions, getting those assessed, all the various processes that you have to go through. The funding that we have at the minute will let us complete that appointments process. But that's really all that the funding we have at the minute would let us do. So when it comes to starting to build up these bodies, to appoint staff and so on, we will need and have sought additional funding through monitoring. But we've flagged all the way along that while we can do the preparatory stages and want to move those along as swiftly as possible, there will be a need for additional funding in terms of the setup and the development of the
Much
bodies.
is that?
No, we're going to move on. I think you're going to come back and give us some information around June monitoring. You did last year around what the bids are.
That would be the normal practice,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we can have that as soon as possible. Okay, members, I'm conscious it's 5 o'clock. We've still got some business to get on with. So I'm going to thank you. I hope you have got a sense that we would like you to come before committee a little bit more regularly. There's quite a lot for us to get through there today, and I'm sure we would all have a number of other issues we would have liked to have raised, but thank you for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, I'm going to move on quickly then, because we've a piece of... actions. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, can we just recap on the actions then, please? Sorry, go ahead, please, Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I picked up on 3 actions for that to ask for the most up-to-date research for the Communities in Transition programme, I think. And then also perhaps clarity on the next 8 areas for Phase 3. We didn't get clarity of what that was, but I know that one member asked specifically what the 8 areas were, so we can follow up on that. Okay. And then finally, to add a briefing on racial relations order to the forward work programme. I didn't pick up on any other actual. Carol, I wasn't. Do you want us to? Could you provide the SIB? I think we've actually.
I think the department have drafted a response. It's just waiting approval to come back.
But that other one about the T-Buck as well.
Yeah. It's just
T-Buck funding for the development.
At the start it says the impression they give, to be fair, was SIB were involved in the development of it. But it was becoming apparent through presentations that SIB were still involved. You know, we had a completely different rate, and yet all groups in the community who are trying to implement this work are getting cut left, right and centre. Yeah. So...
Okay, so have you got some additional ones? So you take
it was just Chair Carroll's point about the T-Buck funding for the shared housing in the Lower Old Park area, and was that T-Buck funding?
And it's not just, I think it goes much wider than that. In truth, it is actually how T-Buck delivers shared housing, and it's certainly not anything like as successful as was indicated.
Yeah, just on that, Nick, Communities in Transition, I think we need to understand what areas were identified and money went into in Phase 1, Phase 2 and Phase 3, so then that we have a clear picture that it's the same areas being targeted each time. And if possible, on the new languages body, how much we're short. Yes, it'll be coming through in the
Monitoring
June monitoring
bids.
round, but I think we need to understand what that actually means.
Do you have a briefing on that coming up? Have we got this in the forward work programme? Yeah.
Monitoring is
Energy monitoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
is-
we'll have it.
23rd, is it?
Yeah, it's the 25th of June, sorry. It's
25th
after
of June.
FM and DFM. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's second, is it? Is our last committee?
2nd of July is our last
Yeah.
meeting,
Okay, members, just moving on quickly. Item 7 then, the Strategic Investment Board, the retention and disposal schedule. So you'll find in the table pack, the clerk's briefs on page 23-25, the retention and disposal schedule, pages 76 to 96 of your pack, and then pages 97 to 99 of your pack you'll find Hansard from last week. So just to advise, the purpose of this item is for the committee to consider the most recent retention and disposal schedule for the Strategic Investment Board. The committee agreed last week to ask SIB whether commercially sensitive information is included in the schedule, and if so, whether it is retained or disposed. So I'm going to ask the clerk to speak to the schedule, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the Chair said, this is the committee now have to consider any retention and disposal schedule that comes within its remit area. And just to remind members that schedules are now subject to negative resolution procedure. So if any member or committee wish to object to a particular part of a schedule, that would need to happen by way of motion, and that would happen within either 30 working days or 10 sitting days of the strategy period. So at its meeting last week, the committee heard about the process that SIB used in agreeing its R&D schedule with PRONI, and in particular, SIB asked that the committee were made aware of Section 2 of the schedule, and that was the only part of the schedule that is unique and specific to SIB. And just to remind members that following discussion, committee asked to obtain further information on how specific commercially sensitive material was dealt with under the schedule. So if you just turn to page 25 of the table pack, as part of the brief there, I had a further conversation with the Strategic Investment Board, and they provided much more information about sensitivity assessments. And just to say there, I'll quote paragraph 11 on page 25 of the table pack. Public bodies must complete a sensitivity review form for each file detailing any proposed closure or redactions. These forms accompany the records during transfer and are reviewed by PRONI's appraisal and sensitivity panel. Section 12 there. If information SIB holds for a client, e.g. an executive department, it would also seek the client's view on the need for redaction or remaining sensitivity issues, and when completing the relevant form for transfer, SIB must specify under regulations exemption whether they're using also complete a public interest test. SIB have stated that this two-stage process ensures transparency, legal compliance and the protection of sensitive information while safeguarding the historical SIB record. So I would hope that that clarifies for members that they are treating all of their information and their records via PRONI's appraisal and sensitivity panel, and then they will also go back to clients and ask whether clients feel there is any sensitivity regarding commercial information, etc.
Okay, any questions or comments to make, members?
Oh, I just think commercial sensitivity is still getting used in the wrong way. They don't need to go back and ask them. Your tender document should be public, and even after 5 years, you're still saying they're commercially sensitive. It doesn't wash.
Okay.
Okay. It's noted on Hansard. Anybody else got any comments or no? Okay, members, if you have no other comments, are we content to agree the schedule? Okay. Content. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, we've sort of scheduled in a 5-minute comfort break, but I'm conscious that we're well past 5 now, and the next session was a closed session on the feedback on the draft final report of the gaps, inquiry into gaps in equality legislation. So I've just checked with the clerk there. Would it be possible if we met in a closed session on Tuesday next week at lunchtime, 1:15, maybe to go through the report? I'm conscious that Sinead isn't here, I'm conscious that Claire isn't here, and conscious that the two parties haven't put a submission in yet. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's just Tuesday's going to be problematic because of other commitments, but certainly do our best.
Just I'm looking at the forward work programme for next Wednesday, and there's quite a lot in there.
There is.
So I don't think we would have time. It's really just to go through the options, the 7 options, boxes, but I'm conscious that SDLP aren't here, and neither is the independent unionists, so I just think that it would be useful. Any other thoughts?
I have a meeting on Tuesday at 1, so I won't be there.
Okay, have you got an indication of when you'll be submitting a response?
Could do so at the start of the week.
What about DUP?
Yeah, I mean, it's going through internal processes, and I am hopeful that it will be by the end of this week.
Okay, because we do need to get this signed off and debated in the chamber.
Yeah.
Preferably before the summer recess,
Yeah.
so we've only a lot of Mondays left.
Yeah. Okay, it's just the option. You don't have to do a big submission. It's really just
Yeah.
one
We
option.
done a 1 page.
Yeah.
We did it on page. Yeah, well, ours was slightly longer, but we did.
As I say, there's levels it has to go through. So, but I'm hopeful it will be by the end of this week. Yeah.
Okay, I wonder is there another time we could maybe meet to, unless we had a pre-meeting next week.
That's
on
what
Wednesday.
I was going to suggest. Whether we
Would
meet
that
earlier
probably
next
suit
Wednesday,
better?
would that suit?
Try and meet at 1:15.
I mean, the day's just been
No. serious.
So
Okay, well we'll go for 1:15 next Wednesday then.
Okay, I'll do my best to be. I'm going to the Crescendo, the schools performance at the Ulster Hall. It's at 12, but anyway, I'll do my best to get here.
Harry should be able to get here, so as long as there's one representative from each party.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll write out to members and just to get.
Okay, thank you.
Huh?
no. We were just saying, if Harry's going, she's trying to say, well, which one of us is going to be here. So.
You can come in online. You can come in online. Okay, members, that's fine. We'll do that next. We'll do that next Wednesday. Okay, members, we're just going to move on to correspondence and refer you to pages 191 to 203 of your pack for the summary of committee correspondence. And just like to draw your attention to a number of items. So on pages 212 to 269 of the meeting pack, you'll find some correspondence there in relation to the deaths, stillbirths, and baby loss bill. Which completed its second stage on Monday the 7th of April. So the bill will amend the law relating to the manner of notification of deaths, stillbirths and births, and the manner of giving particulars relating to them, and will create an enabling power for the Department of Finance to develop and establish a scheme for the issue of certificates recognising the loss of a baby. As per normal practice, the Finance Committee is seeking the views of all Assembly statutory committees to allow members the opportunity to comment on issues in the bill which may be of interest. So I'm asking you to note it and to seek your agreement to write the Department to ask whether TEO has any views or comments on the bill, and whether there are any implications or any role for TEO arising from this bill. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, pages 268 to 272 of your pack. And this relates to a response to the committee from the Department of Justice as regards oversight of training. So just to advise that a response has been received from the Department of Justice to our correspondence of the 9th of May requesting this information on their oversight of training schools and prisons during the period covered by the historical institutional abuse period, together with details of related records. So just to advise that this item of correspondence was one of 8 agreed action points arising from the oral evidence session with survivors together at the meeting on the 2nd of April. All responses to these points have now been received and are listed in the correspondence summary. So just asking you to note that and seek your agreement to forward the responses received to survivors together and advise them to come back to the committee with any further issues. I actually would go further than that. I think that it might be useful to send it to the other HIA groups who came, for example, the Rosetta Trust.
Jerry and John.
Northwest, So I think that there's others that would probably be interested in that information. Okay, so pages 279 to 281 of your pack, and this relates to a response that we've received from the Equality Commission to the committee's correspondence of the 6th of May requesting information on the recent Supreme Court ruling. In the context of the Commission issuing formal guidance, it is advised that the provision of any statutory code of practice in this area is governed by the Sex Discrimination Northern Ireland Order 1976 and is limited to the field of employment, meaning that a statutory code of practice cannot be issued that covers the provision of goods, facilities and services to the public in this equality area. Should a code of practice be considered appropriate in this area, the Department for Communities and the Assembly would have a role with regard to its approval. The Equality Commission currently anticipate producing guidance for employers and service providers towards the end of June 2025, but this will not be a statutory code of practice. As such, it will not be mandatory for individual tribunals or courts to take it into account when determining relevant cases involving allegations of unlawful discrimination. Ultimately, it will be before industrial tribunals or courts to determine whether unlawful discrimination has occurred in any specific circumstances. So I'm just to remind you that the committee has also requested legal advice on the implications of the UK Supreme Court judgment, and this has now been scheduled for next week's meeting. So I'm just asking you to note this correspondence today and seek your agreement to consider the correspondence further as part of the oral briefing from Assembly Legal Services at our meeting next week. Okay? Okay, so 9.8 and 9.9. So Mid-Ulster District Council response to the Local Change Fund, and also you'll find that on page 282 to 287 of your meeting pack, and then a similar response from Fermanagh and Omagh District Council regarding their, was that about
central government policy slightly different?
Okay, slightly different. Okay, so anyway, the Mid-Ulster District Council response is in relation to Local Change Fund. Just seek your agreement as per previous occasions, where we will wait for all the responses from all the councils and take them in the round. Okay, go ahead.
Is it possible that those councils that haven't responded, that we could give them a bit of a push to try and get responses in before the end of year? Before we go into recess.
Yes.
Good idea. Okay, so Fermanagh and Omagh District Council Central Government Policy and Support. So page 288 of your pack. So just to advise, the committee has received correspondence from this council regarding a subcommittee whose primary purpose is to progress research and data analysis of policy interventions and associated resource modelling. The council has also requested an opportunity to present its findings to this committee. Just to note this, and to seek your agreement to agree to arrange in the first instance an informal meeting with the clerk to discuss this work. Agreed? Okay. Okay, so pages 328 to 311. So TEO responds to a correspondence of the 14th of April regarding the draft Refugee Integration and Delivery Framework. So just say we have received this correspondence and to advise that information around funding for Homes for Ukraine, asylum, full dispersal and the Afghan and Syrian settlement schemes have been provided. TO officials are now working with Home Office to determine the likely funding quantum for 25-26 and the plan to bring a paper to the Strategic Planning Group for Refugee and Asylum Seekers for agreement on funding allocations shortly. So just ask you to note this correspondence and seek your agreement to write the department to ask that a copy of the funding paper sent to the planning group is sent to this committee when agreed. Agreed? Okay, so pages 332 to 335 of your meeting pack. Just to advise the First Deputy First Minister, following executive agreement, plan to publish the Refugee Integration Strategy and Associated Delivery Framework. This was also emailed to members on the 30th of May. So you'll find the framework in your pack, table pack, pages 85 to 119. Just ask you to note this and seek your agreement to schedule an oral briefing on the strategy and associated delivery framework on the forward work programme. Great. Okay, so pages 341 to 389 of your pack, you'll find correspondence from the Committee for Finance on the Public Expenditure Outturn and Forecast Information for 2024 to 25. So just to advise, the departments are required to submit a restated in March.
Restated March position.
Restated March position. I thought the were missing. The department has reported that the non-ring-fenced resource DEL TU was forecasting an underspend of £2 million, of which 0.3 million is earmarked by the Treasury related to various items, including delays in filling vacancies, the COVID inquiry, Peace Plus and victims. Also, ring-fenced resource DEL TU was forecasting an underspend of 10.9 million, mainly due to TFC amortisation, where the budgeting and accounting treatment is to be clarified, and capital DEL and £0.2 million underspend as well. So just ask you to note this and seek your agreement to write the department for an explanation of the underspends in relation to non-ring-fenced resource DEL, ring-fenced resource DEL and capital DEL.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clark, if you could read the rest of the items just for noting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 9.2 is the 40th report of the Examiner Statutory Rules, and there are no rules for the attention of this committee in that report. Item 9.5 is a press release from the Department of a meeting between FMDFM and the Prime Minister on the 23rd of May. Item 9.6 from the Department is Investing Activity Report, and it's a summary of the projects and investing activities which have been entered onto the DTS by departments and their agencies. Item 9.10, correspondence from the Department to the Economy Committee for the Economy regarding the Maze Longkesh site. And just to remind members that a visit to the Maze Longkesh Development Corporation has been arranged for the committee for the first meeting back after Halloween recess. Item 9.11 is an invitation from Queen's University to a Queen's MBA information breakfast on the 13th of June at the university's business school. Any member obviously who wishes to attend can use the link in the invitation. Item 9.12 is regarding Periods Products Free Provisions Act, Northern Ireland 2022. It's the report by the Northern Ireland Executive of May 2022 to 2025, and this report was laid in the Business Office on the 29th of May, so members can find it there. Item 9.13, response from the Department to the Committee's correspondence of the 2nd of May requesting information regarding the roles and responsibilities of junior ministers. And just to note, diaries permitting, junior ministers plan to join FM and DFM at the oral briefing committee scheduled for the 25th of June. Item 9.16 is a response from the Department to the Committee's correspondence of the 9th of May requesting information on the analysis of the 2024-25 outturn and forecast outturn for February and March, including a breakdown of non-ring-fenced resource DEL underspend of 2.3 million and the reasons for the delays in filling vacancies within the department and whether these delays contributed to the underspend.
Okay, thank you. Anybody got any comments on any items of correspondence this week? No? Okay, thank you, members. Okay, so we're going to move on to the draft forward work programme. I'm going to ask the Assistant Clerk if she can speak to any changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So it's just the only addition is to next week's meeting, as you've outlined, and that's the oral briefing with Assembly Legal Services on the Supreme Court judgment, just to give that legal advice.
Okay, thank you. Any other business? Go ahead.
In the past we had talked about bringing Fiona Ryan. I don't see her name on the...
Is that the Victims Commissioner?
Yeah.
For survivors of institutional childhood abuse. So is that something we could put on the list?
Yeah, her office had said that they were going to write to the committee following the change in clerk. So we were waiting for that correspondence first, but we can certainly look at scheduling that for the autumn, absolutely.
Well, if we could write to them, I think it would be helpful moving forward.
Okay, anybody else got any other business? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.